Hello, my name is Aaron Marvel and welcome to our video series on Assessment for Learning, Effective Assessment for Learning in the Classroom, Episode 4. In this lesson, we will provide a foundation and purpose for the next subgroup of videos and explain how learning targets, student involvement, and providing feedback all work together to effectively integrate assessment for learning in the classroom. In essence, this is a short introductory video for the more in-depth videos over the three larger topics: implementing learning targets, getting students involved, and providing feedback. This video will attempt to show how all three are interrelated and work together. So let's get started. Here we have a teacher, Mr. Davis, and his student John. Mr. Davis approaches the instruction of John in the typical way by providing a learning target. He writes it on the board and mentions it at the beginning of class. John may or may not refer back to the learning target on the board. We are not really sure. Mr. Davis then teaches a lesson and gives John an assignment. John completes the assignment, returns it to Mr. Davis, and Mr. Davis may or may not give feedback to John concerning the assignment. Mr. Davis will likely consider the quality of work done by the class overall and possibly do some reteach to fill in some common gaps. The class will then likely move on to the next topic in the curriculum or do further extension activities to dive deeper into the standards. What I want to do here is not discuss the instructional strategies of Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis is a wonderful teacher. He's engaging, plans wonderful lessons that are differentiated and learner-centered. He provides student choice and leads his students to dive to appropriate cognitive levels according to the standards. His students really flourish. What I want to focus on is Mr. Davis's assessment practices. The pattern we see here is that John is rarely given the opportunity to take ownership of his learning, goal setting, or evaluation of work. In addition, while Mr. Davis collects assignments and uses the data to make instructional decisions, he rarely informs students of their specific learning needs or engages them in determining their learning needs themselves. The lesson started with the learning target. Notice that I have a dotted line from the learning target to John. I wanted this to represent the ambiguousness of whether John really is thinking or focusing on the learning target at hand. He heard them and probably read them once, but beyond that, does he refer to the learning targets to evaluate his own progress? John was also not given the opportunity to evaluate past work or think about what he needs to learn to reach mastery of this topic, all of which would lead John to think deeply about the learning target. After considering past performances in relation to the current learning standards, John would set goals for himself, which he would continually refer back to throughout the learning process. Mr. Davis's job in this, apart from giving John the opportunities to review past work and set goals, is to give John descriptive and timely feedback specific to John's needs. I know this can be a timely process, so in the upcoming video or feedback, I will attempt to give simple and time-effective ways to provide consistent feedback to students. So, this graphic represents the desired teaching model as it relates to assessment. Notice that the learning targets and feedback are intertwined with one another, with the student-teacher partnership in the middle. I want this to represent the necessity of students and teachers working together to constantly evaluate and give feedback on work with respect to the learning targets. So let's return back to the previous slide. Notice in this diagram how the two most important parts of any lesson, the learning targets and feedback on progress toward learning targets, always are directed from the teacher to the student. This type of approach puts the power and responsibility of both of these components on the teacher, rarely ensuring that the students think about the learning targets, how their own skills measure up to the learning targets, or how they are progressing toward them. I countless times as a teacher returned an assignment with a grade and a few comments which were never read by my students. They went directly in a backpack, never to be seen again, or worse, in a trash can. But as this graphic shows, if a teacher can successfully involve students by explicitly providing learning targets to students, jointly evaluating past and present work in respect to the learning targets, and again jointly providing feedback on classroom products, students will begin to take more ownership of their learning. In the next 3 episodes, we will dive deeper to find out exactly what this looks like as well as provide some tools for you to use to get started in your own classroom. I wanted to end this lesson with a quote by Albert Bandura, a leading psychologist who has greatly influenced our way of approaching instruction, especially in the areas of motivation and self-regulation. So, it says, "The capacity to exercise self-influence by personal challenge through goal setting and evaluative reaction to one's own performances provides a major cognitive mechanism of motivation and self-directedness." One of the biggest questions in the minds of educators is, how do I make my kids care? Or how do I get them motivated to learn? Bandura here gives a simple approach to address these needs, provide students with opportunities to make personal challenges through goal setting, which would be based off of the learning targets, and evaluating their own performances, or in other words, providing personal feedback in response to self-evaluation. These components combined influence motivation to continue pursuit of the goal at hand and help students learn how to direct themselves toward a personal challenge, two priceless skills for any student. So in this lesson, we provided the foundation and purpose for the next subgroup of videos by explaining how learning targets, student involvement, and providing feedback all work together to effectively integrate assessment for learning in the classroom. Thank you for watching episode 4 of Assessment for Learning, Effective Assessment for Learning in the Classroom.